Okay, welcome to the second part of my lecture on principles of opening chess play. In our previous lecture I covered controlling the center and developing your pieces. In this part I want to cover king safety and then just some general opening guidelines. Okay, so let's move to king safety. Basically, the third principle is king safety, and some people may refer to this principle as castle. So, in the opening, the king is actually very vulnerable to attack in the center. Well, actually in the opening and in the middle game. So you want to get your king out of the center. And in one of my previous lectures, I covered an opponent that never liked the castle, and I had a basic strategy of I just attack it right there in the center, and I won many games. And in fact, it was sort of strange this week. He did the same thing, and he made a comment after the game of saying, you know, I can't believe I didn't castle. And he didn't follow this principle. And he didn't realize that his king was too vulnerable in the center in the opening and middle game, and I was able to basically win the game. So basically that's the reason why you want a castle, is the king is too vulnerable in the center. And so you want to castle the king off to the side. And now, so what about, you know, you may say, well, what side am I supposed to castle to and win? So the next two elements cover this. You want to try to castle to a side has a good pawn shield. What I mean by a pawn shield is that generally you're going to have 3 or more intact pawns on that side that haven't moved. So generally, like if you're king side, if you're going to castle king side, you know, these 3 pawns, hopefully they haven't moved. Hopefully one of them isn't missing, and you haven't moved one. Now you might have moved maybe, you know, maybe this rook pawn up one. I'm not going to, you know, sweat that. Or let's say if these pawns are now missing, you won't want to castle to this side if over here you had a good pawn shield. So what the pawn shield is doing is really protecting your king, buffering your king. It's like a wall. You want to have a wall between the king and your opponent. Okay, so if you can think of this wall concept, you wouldn't want a castle to a side that has no wall to protect your king. Okay, so that's will help you identify which side to castle to. And the other thing is selecting the right time. Now, I do hear some people say castle early and often. There are many openings that like you could castle on the 4th move, and that's fine. Sometimes castling too early, though, gives your opponent knowing exactly where to attack. So you could actually castle too early. I know, hopefully I don't get any comments about that. But technically if you castle really too early, you could say, hey, my king's going to be over there, go attack it. You don't want to castle too late. So, and I don't want to say castle at the last possible moment. That isn't good. But you want to make it at a time to where it comes in the natural development phase. You know, like we said, control the center, developing your pieces, and castle. It should work itself into the natural flow of those things. You don't want to castle maybe too early, and you don't want to castle too late where your opponent's attacking you and you need to, you know, one move away from checkmate or something. So you want to make sure he's over there and safe. So we want to castle at the right time. Okay, so now let's move on to some guidelines. You know, we covered the principles, but sometimes it doesn't really help you with what exactly moves you should be making. So, because I could say control the center, develop your pieces, castle, but it doesn't really help you with maybe where to move your pieces. Now I know when I covered the development of the pieces, I showed you the natural development squares. And that will really help you to maybe show you where your pieces should probably be going. Okay, or it's a good indication where they're going. But here are some additional guidelines, these 10 guidelines that I say should also help you select good moves. Okay, now for pawns, generally open with a center pawn. Okay, don't be opening with a rook pawn. If I had to say some opening guidelines, is 1, open with a center pawn. What I mean by center pawn is one of these 2 pawns. For white it's this, for black it's this. Okay, those are center pawns. Want to move one of those 2 pawns. And then the other thing for pawns is you only want to make the necessary pawn moves to control the center or develop your pieces. Okay, you don't want to just make a pawn move to make a pawn move. The pawn move should be attacking a center square, trying to control it, or it should be moved so that you can get a piece out. Now notice, the very beginning of chess, the pieces are here, and you actually can't get out your bishops or your queen. So you actually have to make a pawn move to get out your queen and your bishops. You actually have to make multiple pawn moves to get out your bishops and queen. But you only want to make those pawn moves really that get your pieces out or help to attack these 4 squares. Okay, the next guideline for pieces, those were the 2 for pawns. The ones for pieces are, generally knights are developed before bishops. Okay, it's actually sometimes hard to know exactly where the bishop should go, the opening, but the knight usually is going to be developed to this square. This is a very natural square. So for this, this knight, I've already covered this. For this knight here, it's this square. So it's usually the more natural square for the knight is known first. And the bishop is sometimes a little hard to tell. There's usually a guideline that says knights are generally developed before bishops. Not always true, but generally true. And then try to develop a piece with a threat. Okay, so technically, and here's an example of an opening, which I covered in my last lecture. Why moves this pawn out? See, opening with the center pawn, controlling the center. This pawn actually is controlling this square. Okay, and then black does the same thing, and now notice white makes a move, sort of following the guideline of developing the knight before the bishop. But also it's developing, and now it's threatening actually to take. It's developing with a threat. It's actually saying, hey, I can capture here. The reason you develop with a threat is it limits your opponent's responses, meaning black now cannot just play any move without losing a pawn. So now it probably only has a selected amount of moves it can make, without losing the pawn. So, and the next guideline is don't develop your queen too early. Basically, the queen is going to stay close to home, and it may be one of the more later pieces that are developed. Maybe usually 2 or 3 pieces are developed before the queen. Not always true of it. Usually you've probably got 1 or 2 knights or bishops out before the queen is finally developed. So don't be worried about developing your queen too early. Okay, the next few guidelines, I can get them all on one screen. Remember the castle. I just covered this. For some reason, people forget the castle. Okay, and then I'm going to say try to make multi-purpose moves. If I go back to this game, when I moved this pawn up, if you think about it, this was a multi-purpose move. It actually was controlling this square, but then it also let my bishop out and my queen out. It's allowing me to develop my pieces. So not only did this move control the center, it also allowed me, it's going to allow me to develop my pieces. That's making a multi-purpose move. Technically, when this knight came out, this is somewhat of a multi-purpose move because one, it's developing a knight and attacking a piece. It's a multi-purpose move. What's my next suggestion? Is don't lose material. Don't leave pieces hanging. Don't lose pawns. Don't lose material. Please protect those pieces. Number 9 is don't attack without justification. I covered this in my common chess mistakes. Very common for new person's games or people just starting to play chess to get out like a queen and bishop or a queen and knight and go attack the army or the enemy army. No, don't attack without justification. Meaning, this means your opponent is playing a poor game and you have all your pieces on. Your opponent has nothing out. Then go attack. But just don't go straight out, get 2 pieces out, and attack. In the opening, you want to control the center, get all your pieces out, castle. If you're attacking because you have an obvious reason. And then my final guideline is try to hinder your opponent from accomplishing the 3 goals. So if you think about it, you don't want the idea is you want to accomplish your goals, but you don't want your opponent to accomplish his goals. And your opponent will be doing the same thing. He'll be trying to control the center, develop his pieces and castle, and trying to stop you from doing those three things too. So not only should you be trying to do those things, you should be trying to stop your opponent from doing those things. Maybe you can stop him from castling or things like that. Okay, so there's the end of the second portion of this lecture. Please, I would review it one more time to go over the principles of opening play and